Today on the Kuvio Caller.
I think the key of self-learning is being a copycat.
By reading other people's code and then finding the patterns in that code and doing the same thing.
Yeah, like when you need to find a solution to something, probably someone else has already done that.
I chat with Fernando Rodriguez, one of Kuvio's solutions developers, on his interesting career transition from IT infrastructure to web and app development.
What's up, everybody? This is Joseph Young, and I am the founder and CEO of Kuvio Creative, and welcome to episode 6 of the Kuvio Caller. I'm joined today by Fernando Rodriguez. He is a Brazil-based solutions developer that works alongside me at Kuvio. And I wanted to talk to him specifically today about he has a pretty unique experience transitioning from a strictly IT role to Kuvio has been his first web and app development role. So Fernando, it's really good to have you. Say hi to everybody.
Hey guys.
So I still remember this presentation that you did. I feel like a couple of months after you started, you did this presentation where you compared your experience at Kuvio as a developer, as a brand new developer, to your experience in IT, and I feel like you reached down into your soul to figure out what the differences are between those two experiences. And I still remember it because it was I don't know, it was one of my favorite presentations of all time. The thing that stuck in my head was I think you said something like, to manage servers, you have diagrams and you have blinking lights and you have buttons that you can push and you have a room that you can walk into and you have all this stuff. But then to solve a problem in the developer world, you just have yourself and your brain. Right?
Yeah. So I had a couple of years of experience on infrastructure IT. I had 5 years working as a consultant.
Okay.
And the whole of infrastructure consultant is very different from developer. As you say, there are blinking lights. There's a lot of stuff to handle in the infrastructure. And to work with that, you have to set up a big laboratory. Have to set up virtual machines. You have to have a good infrastructure in your house to study that stuff. And when I switched to the developer world, I just needed a crap computer to work on the code, and it's much easier on the requirements that you need. But on the other hand, it's very hard because you are dealing a lot with logic and code, and that is the beautiful of the work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the thing that's always stuck with me about what you said, because I think it's completely true. I've never actually experienced the other side, like the IT, but to me, that side is so overwhelming to me because you're dealing with actual physical things instead of logic. Right? I mean, you're doing a little bit of logic to figure out how to, structure the different virtual machines and connect them together and stuff like that. But that's just not the way that my brain works. So I always thought that was really, really fascinating. So did you have zero development experience when you started at Kuvio? Completely zero?
When I started, I did some C# tutorials to learn how to do the basic coding. But at the start, I was very confused about the architecture, the designs, and stuff like that. When I worked as a consultant in infrastructure, I had a lot of experience with scripting, which helped a lot with the programming logic, and that kind of that's the main essence of the programming.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The thing about scripting is that it's just running every line of code one by one by one by one, right? From the top to the bottom in most cases. and the difference with programming is that it's moving around and all over the place, right? All over all these different files and pulling stuff and having parameters come from different places and all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah, that was, I think, the first thing that really confused me, because I was throwing a project that has like a bunch of coding files, and I didn't know how the code jumped to each other. Like I'm used to do a simple script that runs, like I said, from top to bottom.
Yeah.
But when you go to an actual application, there is like coding, calling coding everywhere.
Yeah. So how
Great.
much sense does it make to you now? Does it make more sense how the files are structured now and stuff like that, or does it still feel crazy to you?
Yeah, now I'm more confident, and I learned a lot of the architecture and the design, reading or what our senior developers have developed, and that helped a lot to understand how the applications are built and in how they work.
Yeah. Cool. So, like, what is your process? So, since you're basically completely self-taught, you're also still doing completely full stack development. I mean, you're interacting with the database, you're doing back end, you're doing front end, and you're doing SQL, C Sharp, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Angular.
Yeah, if you stop to think, it's a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah. Like, what's your process for like, okay, I have a problem in front of me, you know, like the problem you've been working on for the last couple of weeks to make um, a new version of a catalog for one of our clients. Like, that involves everything, right? And it also involves a project that you haven't spent much time, if at all, like looking through. Like, where do you start with something like that?
I think the key of self-learning is being a copycat.
By reading other people's code and then finding the patterns in that code and doing the same thing.
Yeah, like when you need to find a solution to something, probably someone else has already done that. And I find that a lot on our projects, like solutions that were already implemented that does not always the same thing, but similar things. And you can use that kind of information to do what you need to do, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So are you talking about copycatting other projects that Kuvio has, or like Stack Overflow and other code that you find on the internet, or both?
I used to copy more of what our developers have done on the past. And that is beautiful, because that way we keep the same architecture through the whole application. Like if I think that, I'm a super master senior developer and I will do that on my way, the better architecture that I think that is the more appropriate. But no, that's not the right attitude. I think you have to do what's already being done on that project and keep the same style of the code.
I see. Because that way it fits into the rest of the code, and no matter where the person goes, basically they just have to learn that one architecture and they can find their way around everything.
Yeah, if someone starts one specific architecture on the project, he had a reason to that, right? So if you change that architecture, you're gonna start to face problems that person didn't face, and when that person starts work on the project again, you need to learn a new architecture. You need to figure out how that works.
Yeah.
And I think that's not good for the team, for collaboration and stuff like that.
So, okay, so you're also a certified ethical hacker. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So like, has there been anything on that side? I guess the scripts that you talked about, like, has there been anything else that, like, what was it that actually got you interested in development? Was there a particular story, or was it just that you were just naturally interested in it, or what?
Okay, so let's start from the beginning. After I worked has some years in infrastructure consultant, I learned a lot of basic concepts of computers, and one field that always fascinated me was security.
Okay.
So to me, to merge from infrastructure consultant to a security consultant was very easy because a lot of the basic concepts was already on my mind, and I was trying to aim on something that has potential on the future. Like if you think about how technology is growing, a lot of stuff from our house on companies are being connected to the internet, right? And that makes our information, our world very fragile.
Yeah.
And security is becoming very, very important in this case.
So like, okay, so from the security side of things, you started going in that direction, but then like, what made you want to become a developer? Like, what made you start wanting to learn C sharp and all of that kind of stuff?
So after I left the infrastructure world, that is a world that is dying on the time because most of things are being automated, and you don't need that infrastructure guy that implements stuff because most of things, as I said, is being already implemented automatically. So after working as an infrastructure consultant, my heart was separated in two areas that I like to go. First, I had this passion for security. That is very, very awesome. Have potential in the future. And on the other side, I was very fascinated by doing scripts and how to build that stuff that does automated stuff
Right.
and requires a lot of logic. And then Barto, which is I think our most senior developer of the company, he's a child friend of mine.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, we are working in a development company, and what do you think about joining us?" And I was thinking, well, I really like development, and it's a really good opportunity, and I took the leap.
Yeah. So did you start learning C sharp because we were a Microsoft shop?
No, I started learning C sharp because of some tips of Barto.
Okay.
And then after some months studying C sharp, he said, "Oh, we have uh, a place on our company that is looking for someone new on development."
Yeah.
It was when we started talking, and I did some presentations about security, and it was very awesome.
Yeah. So I'm just so interested in, so we have so many people on the team with all of these different kinds of experiences, right? We have Barto, who I think has a more traditional development career. I think he went to school for it, and then he had a couple of jobs. And then we have Margaret and Layla, who did not go to school for web development, but they did a boot camp. And then we have you, who who is
That had
completely
zero
self-taught.
experience.
Yeah. And everybody on the team is working together, and everybody on the team kind of is at pretty much the same level and are working on really hard problems, and still solving them in a much better way than any of the 10 or 15-year long developers that I've previously worked with at other companies. Like, I want to open up your brains and figure out how you approach these problems in a way that you're able to solve things without having 15 years of experience in databases and in C# and in .NET and in ASP.NET and in MVC and in Angular and in JavaScript and in TypeScript and Visual Studio and hosting and Azure and like all of the things that are required on that. Like, you pretty much have to know a little bit about all of it, right? And so how do you do it? I guess is my big question.
Like when someone gives me a task, the first thing I do is what needs to be done on that task, and then the second thing I go through is where is the project, where is the code, and how is the code structure on that project. And the third thing that I go through is, has someone ever done that on that project that I can copy the same functionality,
Okay.
and or just copy the functionality and change one or two parameters there. And most of the tasks that I got that I have to develop is develop something simple, follows that flow. But if we try to think of something that we never implemented before, which was the case that we worked on the geo server, then it's a complete different scenario, right?
Right.
So what you need to do is try to find the mapping functionality. Yeah. That was something that we never worked before, and there are like specialized professionals to work on that, right?
Yeah.
And what we did was we browsed through the documentation, see how that works, try to understand their language, and start working with that with their language. So we have to learn a complete different paradigm, and that's the beauty of the job also, right? You are also learning different patterns of knowledge, and that helps you learn a new pattern of knowledge, and that goes on and goes on and goes on. Right. You see,
because they're all related to each other in some way, right? Like, you see the things that people solved with GeoServer that somehow in some way relate to either a problem that you've seen solved yourself or that you solved yourself, or at the minimum you can understand why they solved it in that way. Once you read enough about it and you get used to it, then you can kind of put yourself into their brains, and then suddenly you can start building stuff in the way that they want you to. But it's kind of the same thing that you were saying earlier, right? What you're trying to find when you're reading documentation of GeoServer is, how is this thing architected? So I can do it in the way that is the same that they want me to do it, so that it makes sense, right? And so
exactly.
That's really interesting.
You don't have to change the word to make it work your way. It's a very martial concept from Aikido, which is you don't have to face the opponent face to face. You can look the opponent way and bend the opponent will to your will. And that applies the same to technology. You can bend you don't have to create your whole stuff in technology. You can look how people are doing stuff and create the same way that they are creating.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Was that too deep?
No, that's really beautiful. I mean, and it's true. I mean, I've been developing since I was 8 years old, and back then I wasn't working with a team or anything like that, right? I was just playing around. But that concept that you just said has been exactly my experience learning. Like the very first thing that I did, the very first language that I learned was Quick Basic, because it came with Microsoft DOS or whatever.